I feel like currently the United States and perhaps the entire world is having to reevaluate their education system because where previously we had universities, which were supposed to be institutions of learning that can bring like minded individuals together and allow them to share and swap ideas, we've had to kind of come face to face with the rather unpleasant reality that we've kind of turned these universities into credentialing machines, I suppose. And they've become horribly, horribly bloated with overhead costs of administrators and the such that they've become a bastardized version of what they used to be. And they've even, in a way, failed to allow for the upward mobility that they promised. This deception and false promise becomes incredibly evident when we're seeing some colleges move all of their classes online and effectively cutting out half of the value of going to college, which is to be around like-minded individuals. And yet, they're still keeping their tuition entirely the same while offering a vastly inferior product. Generally, I think it's probably pretty well understood that if you really want to learn something for the sake of learning something, the best way is almost always to go to YouTube or ask Google. You can learn practically everything or anything off of just YouTube videos. There's a font of knowledge that is almost always vastly superior to any online course cobbled together by some underpaid, interns that they're selling for premium tuition. And so it really lays bare that they're not selling the education. What they're selling is the credential, the gold star, the luxury brand, the ability to say, I went to Harvard. And unfortunately, that is still incredibly valuable, and there are a lot of incredibly wealthy people who will still pay for just that. But I feel like that is a bastardization of what education should be. Ideally, an education system would take those who are capable, increase their capabilities, and then allot them to a job in which they are capable and interested in. And that process would do so as quickly and efficiently as possible. But unfortunately, the universities have failed in almost every single one of those aspects because currently we just shove everyone into university, and there's very little way of determining what they're capable of, as well as allotting them to a job that they could actually find meaningful. Because I'm sure many have gotten degrees in fields that they were interested in, and yet there were no jobs on the other end of that because the university really has no incentive to get their students employed after they've already had their tuition paid. They've already saddled these kids with thousands to tens of thousands of dollars worth of debt that can never be forgiven, so they've gotten paid. But whether or not those kids actually get a job in the field that they studied in doesn't matter to these universities in the slightest. And that's pretty apparent with how we see there's a lot of fluff degrees that have been sold as reasonable career paths. And it's really quite tragic because these kids who perhaps maybe even have no business being in university and would find greater success in technical schools or the like, where they're not saddled with thousands and thousands of dollars of debt, are passed along these easier degree paths, the social sciences, the soft sciences, these degrees that aren't immediately translatable to anything tangible. There can only be so many psychologists or sociologists, and the universities don't really have any incentive to not keep cranking them out because they get paid the same amount of tuition regardless, whether it's a psychology major or a hard sciences engineer. Obviously, you're more likely to get a job as an engineer, but they don't particularly care about that. And that is one of the greatest failings of our current education system.